Surprise, yet another scandal involving Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's nominee to be the next Secretary of Defense. Now, people who know who Pete Hegseth is, they have seen him go to bat for all sorts of people convicted or accused of war crimes, right? People who served in uniform, swore an oath to the Constitution, and are legally bound by American and international laws about the way that they treat people like detainees and civilians in a combat zone. Hegseth is a major, major fan of soldiers, Marines, who go too far and violate American and international laws. We're talking about service members whose brothers in arms testify against them because of the things that they did in combat that are illegal. Pete Hegseth is a major fan of the abuse of military force, which, again, is why it's so frightening that he could potentially be our next Secretary of Defense in the context of the fact that this guy has written in his book about a national divorce that he expects to happen here in the United States, that he kind of writes about gleefully. So what's this latest scandal? Well, Pete Hegseth has been getting escorted around the Capitol by a former Master Sergeant from the U.S. Army, this guy named Jacob Hasenbein. And Hasenbein left the Army in disgrace. In 2019, he was participating in a training exercise where an American citizen, a former Iraqi soldier who came from Iraq's elite kind of special forces counterterrorism unit, again, an ally in a training situation, in a non-combat situation, Hasenbein led his troops into what was supposed to be a hostage rescue scenario. And when Hasenbein came upon this person, this American, who's in a training scenario, again, this is not combat, this guy hogtied him, smashed his head against concrete, and left him bleeding. Now, in the training scenario, he was supposed to come in and interrogate this person who's playing an enemy fighter. Like, where is the hostage? And instead, he started physically abusing him. In no scenario is it okay in a training scenario to hogtie and beat someone. In fact, in war, it would be illegal to hogtie and beat someone, both international and American law. Now, Pete Hegseth's bodyguard, who he's taking with him into congressional offices, into Senate offices, as he's trying to convince senators that he's a good enough decision maker to be our next Secretary of Defense, he's taking this guy into their offices. This guy was convicted at court-martial. However, the judge threw out the case after the fact because it was revealed that apparently one of his friends was talking to a juror during the trial. So Hegseth's little henchman has been able to say, oh, well, I was discharged honorably after 22 years of service. But what is very likely is the scenario is that he was told, well, we're either going to retry this case in which you will be found guilty again, or you can get out. Now, when this guy's identity was revealed and the backstory came out, journalists went and approached Hegseth's people, and Hegseth's people basically said that, oh, this guy was given a raw deal. Because that is Hegseth's belief. Any soldier, any troop who is convicted of committing a war crime or any crime like that, stateside or otherwise, is always the actual victim in Hegseth's mind. I think this is really an indication not just of Hegseth's belief system, but his decision-making capacity, his ability to make good decisions. Look, as Secretary of Defense, he would not be a politician in the typical sense, right? He's not vying for votes from the American public, but he is vying for the votes of our representatives, our senators. And that means something. When our senators vote either in favor or against any particular nominee, they are supposed to be doing it because they're representing their constituents. Now, I don't think that it's within the mainstream of the Republican Party, at least historically, to be strongly in defense of war criminals and people convicted of violent assaults. people who are convicted at court-martial for committing violence against our allies, fellow Americans, in training scenarios, right? That's bizarre. But in Trump's Republican Party, this seems to have been normalized. Again, Pete Hegseth has not just been advocating for these people on TV, but as a Fox News host, he was traveling down to D.C. and to Mar-a-Lago to talk with Donald Trump and request pardons of these war criminals. So we've talked about the problem. What's the solution? It doesn't matter if your senator is a Republican or a Democrat. They should be hearing from you about the fact that you believe that Pete Hegseth is not qualified to be our next Secretary of Defense. So if you want to do something about this, you can go to 5calls.org. That's the number 5calls.org. And in there, you can search on the left side of your screen. There's going to be a little button that talks about how Pete Hegseth should not be our next nominee. When you click on that and you enter your zip code, it will tell you who your members of Congress and your senators are. And on that page, it'll explain the background of what's going on with Pete Hegseth and with his nomination. And towards the bottom of that page, there is going to be a script that you can read from that is very short, something like 3 to 5 sentences that just tells you you're identifying yourself. The reason why you're calling is to tell your senator, your member of Congress, to stand in opposition to the nomination of Pete Hegseth to be our next Secretary of Defense. If you're leaving a message, it's a good idea to leave your home address. That way, your opinion will be registered. It'll be tallied. And again, it doesn't matter if your senator is a Republican or a Democrat. They should be hearing from you on this because this is important. This is how our democracy works. If your members of Congress, if your senators never hear from you, they cannot represent you. So there are 1,000 reasons that Pete Hegseth should not be our next Secretary of Defense. But if this one disturbs you, that he's walking around with someone who hogtied and beat an American, a former Iraqi elite soldier who served in their counterterrorism unit, and then came to the United States and became a United States citizen, and then continued his service by working with American troops to prepare them for war, if that disturbs you, it's time to go to 5calls.org and make those calls.